Assalamualaikum, selamat sejahtera to all Malaysians and a very warm welcome to all our attendees from all over the world. Thank you for your interest and thank you for joining us. This is the MIHAS Knowledge Hub and we are very glad to host all of you here today from so many countries. We've put together a lineup of distinguished experts as we start conversations and connections across multiple sectors and disciplines on key drivers of the halal economy and export opportunities moving forward. We hope the sessions inspire new business ideas and bring real development and immediate activation. Our next session is the third plenary session on trending topics, which examines current scenarios, opportunities, and technologies that are likely to be part of the new normal. It is now my pleasure and honour to introduce the moderator for the next session, Ms. Jenna Beh, board member of IIPCC Malaysia, a chapter under the International IP Commercialization Council, IIPCC, which is permanent observer of the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, an agency of the United Nations. Jenna will be introducing the very distinguished panel of speakers and leading the session on Islamic IP and business sustainability, where we look at the role of Islamic intellectual property for business sustainability in the halal economy. Over to you, Jenna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, MIHAS and Matriad for organizing this event. Today, we have a plenary session focusing on Islamic intellectual property, Islamic IP, and business sustainability. We have with us today three amazing speakers. My name is Jenna from IIPCC, and I'm your moderator today. So here we have Professor Aida, we have Datuk Dr. Daud, and Patricia Chung. So we can pass it on the session to Professor Aida. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Professor Dr. Ida Madieha binti Abdul Ghani Azmi. I'm a professor at International Islamic University Malaysia, and I have been teaching intellectual property, teaching, researching, and doing policy research on intellectual property for 30 years. Now, we all know that the global Islamic economy provides vast opportunities, not only for halal products, but also fashion, media, recreation, Muslim-friendly travel, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, and Islamic finance. With a total of 1.8 billion Muslims across the world and 2.2 trillion spending on halal products and services, the global Islamic economy is poised to provide lucrative opportunities for businesses, provided you have good products and services, excellent business strategies, and of course, effective use of unique and distinctive identifiers in the form of intellectual property rights. So as most consumers are working from home to protect themselves and their loved ones during this pandemic, we find that the demand for halal products and services does not wane. Except for travel sector that has been crippled as a result of the pandemic, the other sectors are mostly facing the state of plateau or state of little or no change following the pandemic. As the world bounced back against the effect of pandemic, all the halal sectors will recover at a much faster rate. So as you can see here, these opportunities can be explored further to your company's advantage through intellectual property rights. To enable us to utilize intellectual property at the most, we must have a basic understanding of what intellectual property is. Intellectual property plays a number of roles. First, it plays a crucial role in the marketing strategy of your products and services. In today's world, the abundant supply of goods or services on the markets have made life very challenging for any business, big or small. Secondly, it plays a distinguishing role. It differentiates your products from others, which is a prerequisite for success in today's markets. It protects your innovation from being copied and free-ridden by others. It forms a very important business asset. And as you know, that in this current knowledge-driven economy, the different type of intangible assets of business are often more important and valuable than its tangible asset. Globally, as well as Malaysia, IP is the creation of statutes. The Malaysian IP system is one of the most established legal system in Malaysia, with a dedicated organization responsible in charge of it, that is MyIPO, and a specialized IP court to adjudicate IP disputes. Malaysia has acceded to a number of world treaties on IP and has also signed many FTAs, whether bilateral or multilateral, with provisions on intellectual property. In so doing, Malaysia has updated the law to be of global level. In fact, in the ASEAN region, our IP system is just second to Singapore. Malaysia also offers the international IP registration pathway, that is the Patent Cooperation Treaty and Madieha Treaty, that allows a single filing of patent and trademark to be enforceable to a number of countries around the world. This is particularly useful for halal businesses that aim global market, as your IP can be filed in many countries around the world, as the system is recognized all over the world. All businesses have relied on the effective use of one or more types of IP to gain and maintain a substantial competitive edge in the marketplace. There is a wide array of IP tools that can be used by businesses, ranging from copyright that protects the creative or intellectual property literary works, patents that protects novel invention or novel process, trademark that protects the symbols that represent a brand or a product, industrial design that protect the aesthetic appeal of a finished product, trade secrets that protects the confidential information of a business, and geographical indication that protects the sign used on products that have a specific geographical origin and possesses qualities or a reputation that are due to that origin. The correlation between one type of IP with others are explained vividly in the above diagram. Now, trademark system in Malaysia is very established already. And if you look at the number of trademark applications in Malaysia, it has been consistently in the range of 40,000 applications from 2017 to 2020. And the range of patent applications in around 7,000 to 8,000 annually. Malaysia, in fact, is ranked 6th among Muslim countries and 62nd in the world, and has 6.1% growth in terms of trademark application. Now, of course, if you compare globally, the Western countries and Eastern powerhouse, which is Japan, China, and South Korea, dominate top of the charts. And the highest ranked Muslim country is Iran at 16th. But Malaysia is a formidable force as far as IP application is concerned. Now, one of the ways that shows how strong our IP protection is the International IP Index 2021 that utilized various indicators such as enforcement of IP rights, membership in IP treaties, and the state of R&D for each IP category. Malaysia is in fact rated the 27th highest in overall IP index rating at a score of 51.61. Among the strengths of the Malaysian IP system that has been mentioned is that the strong enforcement environment that is put forward in the trademark amendments of 2020, increased action against copyright infringement, generous R&D and IP-specific tax incentive in place, various initiatives done by MyIPO to speed up the processing of patent applications such as patent prosecution highway, strong focus by Malaysian government on IP as a commercial asset and promoting technology transfer. Now, let's move on to how IP can be very useful for your business. Firstly, and most notable, IP helps to protect your brand from being misused, counterfeited, or confused with other businesses. A brand represents the company. It is the link between the company and its customers, a relationship that took years to be built through the quality and standard of your own. Therefore, it is essential to make sure that people do not confuse your brand with another. Such is usually what happens when a brand manages to be established in the market. People always want a piece of the pie. The easiest way for others to do that is by simply exploiting your brand for their own marketing, using any particular name, logo, or trademark of yours, and usually applying slight modification on the original. Moving on, it must be emphasized that a brand also shapes the initial presumption of the product itself. Take, for example, local brands like Adabi or Barrel's Chocolate. Both had penetrated the global market and could be found elsewhere around the world. As such, you do not only want to be recognized, but you also want the consumers to know whatever they have overseas does not differ from those found in Malaysia. Everything should be the same, and as such, overseas consumers or locals who are staying overseas will have confidence that any product displaying your brand is of the same quality. This also provides for opportunities for companies to diversify their product or sub-brand a product of a different line. In this case, the power cat brand is manufactured by Adabi and was claimed to be the only halal certified cat food in the world. Such a claim may have been skepticized by the public, but since power cat is related to Adabi and Adabi is well known for it being halal, the claim becomes more believable. In a sense, the image and reputation of Adabi is also conveyed to power cat. This is ever more essential in the context of halal market. The high standard of quality and hygiene involved in the manufacturing of a product or in providing of a service is often associated with the concept of halalan tayyiban. Thus, any company or product claiming to be halal will be held with the same high standards. This creates a brand association that mutually serves each other, especially for the company as it provides assurance to consumers. If the logo or branding of the product changes, it will definitely impact the company's revenue through the product. Hence, brand's consistency is key. People like buying things halal, and most times they won't seek the halal logo on your product. Instead, they will only look for your brand. In the context where there is no discrete halal logo displayed on the product, such as for halal fashion, brand strength plays a bigger role in sustaining business. In some situations, the brand also encapsulates the experience behind the company, such as this rising fashion brand that has rags to riches story. No company could grow without customers' trust and belief in the product. Thus, the notion that the product and services offered by this company is a quality choice that propels the company to its current position that could be protected through IP. So in summary, IP does not only help marketing by protecting a brand, but it also helps in adding value to your company. A strong protected brand could be used in many different ways, such as leverage for financing purposes or be traded or licensed for the appropriate sum of money. Same goes if, for example, someone designed an app to detect all halal restaurants in a map. The IP related to the app, when protected, could be commercialized to a company's benefit. Thank you very much. I pass the screen to the other panelists.
And next speaker, we have Patricia Chung from IIPCC.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patricia Chung here. I'm actually from IIPCC Malaysia. I'm actually wearing two hats over here. Myself is actually a founding partner of Chung Chambers, a law firm, a boutique law firm specialized into IP, intellectual property. And I was being appointed as president for IIPCC Malaysia chapter since 2019. And I'm also a registered member for Chartered Institute of Arbitrators for UK and Malaysia branch, and also for Malaysia Institute of Arbitration. Myself is also an accredited mediator for Malaysia Bar Mediation Center, MMC. And I was actually being appointed as honorary legal advisor for the SME Association, Samantha. Without further ado, I will share my slides right now. Thanks for being inviting me as a speaker, and in collaboration with MIHAS, IIPCC Malaysia would like to also actually highlight on the Islamic IP and business sustainability over here. And I would like to start with a quick introduction about IIPCC. IIPCC stands for International Intellectual Property Commercialization Council. In short, IIPCC, a global non-profit, non-partisan organization promoting mainly on IP innopreneurship. Yes, you're right. Intellectual property, innovation, okay? Entrepreneurship. So we would like to actually encourage more young people nowadays having entrepreneurship skills, knowledge, together with their innovation mindset. Of course, not forgetting intellectual property. As we know, intellectual property has become part and parcel of our life, and IP can be a corporate asset. And it also helps to generate job opportunities. The main objective of IIPCC is to create a balanced ecosystem for IP in order to promote IP commercialization to be realized. And of course, the main thing Malaysia chapter would like to do is that to make IP commercialization happen. And the main solution offered by IIPCC Malaysia and IIPCC as a whole is none of IKR, International Knowledge Registry. This is a proof of existence system. It actually makes you digital fingerprint the documents or confidential information that you would like to file. And this have been granted with patent for this technology. Next, we'll move to the second solution is SiteCert. This is to promote, the co-working space environment to make sure and ensure the healthy growth of the company. Why we need to maintain such international standard over here? Simple. If we do not maintain the standard over here, probably a startup once joined into any grand event held at the co-working space, probably they will quickly jump into conclusion to be acquired by the big boys. So having said that, the startup will never have a chance to even see a daylight to grow and become SME or further to MNC or get listed. And of course, the third solution IIPCC is having is a cost. Actually, this have been actually collaborated with Korean government and university. They have actually adopted this advanced IP entrepreneurship program to promote the same thing, the objective that IIPCC would like to reach out to worldwide IP entrepreneurship. And lastly, from time to time, we do have education program, including webinar, workshop, and all kinds of conferences. And these are the worldwide chapter lists that we are having over here. And I will jump straight into our topics today. I won't be overlapping with our previous, distinguished speaker, Professor Dr. Ida. She had actually covered the wide range of IP over here. So as you can see, this is the summary of it. But today, I will actually highlight more towards trade secret. And this is a common confusion among some of the IP categories. Give, for example, a lot of people have been looking into tourism and they want to claim, ownership in terms of the locality for certain products or some cultural things. So over here, a lot of people have been, previously confused or even have a heated argument as to whether, how should we actually claim this kind of ownership? To be frank, IP do comprise of traditional IP and non-traditional IP. So if you were to talk about the origin of the product, then we will look for the geographical indication whereby Professor Dr. Ida has already covered. And whoever would like to actually file something, whether be it invention, branding, or copyright or whatsoever, before they can actually make up their mind as to which category they should proceed for, then that will actually fall under trade secret. So let's have a very quick look at the GI, geographical indications. These are the examples, the registered one in Malaysia, as you can see. So the main idea of registering a GI is to identify the geographical origins of the product, like I mentioned earlier, and it will, equate with the specific quality and characteristic attributable to their geographical origin. Of course, bear in mind, GI does not protect for secret recipe. So what can actually make sure that you protect your trade secret, your secret recipe well, is actually under trade secret, or some of them actually, they prefer to opt under patent, okay? And this is the definition, put up by YBhg at their official website. Trade secret is actually the last IP rights. Actually, this have been discussed globally during the Trade Secret Symposium back in YBhg Geneva in 2019 November. And trade secret to YBhg is actually something, information such as, commercially valuable and known among a limited group of peoples, and this confidential information have been taken reasonable steps to protect within the organization. So this is the definition given, but of course, we also look into Canada IP office, how they define trade secret over here. So they define trade secret includes business information, also mentioning commercial value, okay, derived from its secrecy. And this is very, very valuable in the way how you actually protect and handle it. The processing of handling trade secret will actually makes you qualified to protect under trade secret, okay? And also not forgetting the most famous trade secret, you know, Coca-Cola have been using it, the formula. So this company have been selected trade secret as the IP category they would like to go for their secret recipe instead of patent, because patent do have disclosure requirement throughout their filing. And IPOS define trade secret also includes the details of company's financial affairs, you know, and who access to the confidential information. Basically, they cannot simply disclose it to a third party. Otherwise, this will be in breach of the confidentiality. Now we look at Malaysia. Do Malaysia actually have a specific law or act to govern trade secret? The answer is no. Malaysia is relying on common law of tort, breach of confidential information, mainly on contract law. This is actually the photos taken when I was in Geneva for the Trade Secret Symposium back in November 2019. As you can see over here, this particular lady standing on the far left, she is actually Rachel. So Miss Rachel, she's actually from SpaceX. She came and actually deliver her point of view about trade secret. And of course, with me, there's other people from former USPTO like David Kapos, and we also have people from IIPCC, Johnson Kong, and we also have Dr. Richard Thurston. He was the former legal counsel from TSMC, the very well-known listed company in Taiwan for semiconductor. And thereafter, I would like to go to my next slide. Miss Rachel Lovejoy, she thinks that, you know, protecting trade secret need a very solid internal strategy and best practice. The gatekeeper in an organization is very, very crucial. This people is the one make sure that the secret is well protected within the organization by going through all kinds of agreements like NDA. And of course, not forgetting US, in 2016 itself, there's an Act, Defend Trade Secret Act was being enacted. And this actually establishing, you know, a cause of action on a misappropriate of trade secret. In US, this is actually a criminal offense we call espionage, okay? And DTSA does not actually preempt existing state law. So businesses can still approach to their state court. This is to govern trade secret per se in terms of misappropriation of trade secret. Of course, thereafter, we have Mr. Carsten Fink, the YBhg chief economist. He mentioned that economists should worry about trade secret protection on two main reasons. Policy is an issue to be concerned, and what constitutes lawful disclosure. In particular, in the context of employee mobility, that means your former employees, how are you going to deal with them? So what is the extent of disclosure is considered as need to know basis. This is very crucial. And thereafter, I would go direct into IP commercialization. IP commercialization, in fact, is actually wider than IP monetization. So IP commercialization need to involve economic value to start with. Otherwise, you can't actually proceed further in terms of valuation. Okay. And of course, I will also cover other things that have been listed down here, different types of ways for IP commercialization. And I will also touch on non-fungible token in a short while. So you look at the different types of licensee over here. I think I would like to touch on a simple example like ERP, enterprise resource. So this kind of software integration, you need a lot of data. So by way of licensing, you can actually license out the software that you develop for ERP system. And of course, franchising is under the subset of licensing. So a lot of people actually confuse thinking that franchising is actually a much more bigger heading compared to licensing. but which is not right. Okay, franchising is actually under the subset of licensing. So we do have cross-licensing, stick licensing, carrot licensing, open source licensing, compulsory licensing, OEM, ODM, all those things. And also now with the implementation of Trademark Act 2019, back in December 2019 itself, trademark has been recognized as a collateral in Malaysia. So having said that, you can actually pledge your trademark for funding. But of course, there's actually a long way to go in terms of valuation of IP to realize, the valuation and IP commercialization. And also not forgetting certain investment scheme which is in compliance with the law. This will include all kinds of fancy business model that you can actually put in, but those schemes will be regulated by the relevant authority. And of course, like I mentioned just now, this is the subset that I mentioned. In terms of technology licensing, there will be hard technology, process technology, and also software. And one of the interesting example here, I think this is a global one, is based on the concept of copyright itself, come up with a book. This is the procedure and the rules that you are following in terms of the concept and how you actually reach out to others by word of mouth, when you want to actually market your businesses. So Dr. Ivan Meisler have been leveraging on their IPs to go worldwide in terms of franchising businesses. And they also have BNI Connect, global network connection for all this. This is one type of IP commercialization, as you can also keep them out. And other example will include like Disney. So you also see, Disney as actually one of the non-business format franchise, okay? Because you don't see them typically adopt one standard mode of IP commercialization over here. Their business fundamentals, they have production of cartoon animation. In terms of their market exploitation, that is really huge. They are into everything, filming, the cartoon characters for even their Disney theme park. They are promoting all sorts. So that's why we call this as a non-business format kind of franchising. And not forgetting the banner grouping like audit firms, KPMG, Ernst & Young, and also we have voluntary change like Econ, Minimark, Coca-Cola itself, marketing franchise. And also we have some fancy pocket KFC franchising in China as well. So it's actually a digital mode for that. Next, I will go into management franchise like hotel. They will have the loyalty program scheme and time sharing. In fact, this is governed under our Interest Scheme Act 2016 in Malaysia. And of course, not forgetting, the upcoming, very, very heated types of licensing, as we can see everywhere right now in the digital space, open source license, additional licensing agreements, that actually provide the SaaS model, software as a service, kind of agreement. So you have all kind of this different licensing. And what is actually an open source? A very layman term to understand what is open source license is that, there's a link for the video over here talking about the Lego. And Lego, actually, if you don't know how to build the fundamental structure, you can actually build the fundamental structure at the bottom, and then you ask for help to build the rooftop. So this is the concept that you actually can tie up with the open source in GitHub. And of course, not forgetting Roblox, during the pandemic moment right now, Roblox has actually turned into a 30 billion company, worth company back in early March itself. And there's a cross-licensing. Why is it a cross-licensing? Because Sam Drozdoff, a former product designer at Facebook, sees a potential bigger untapped opportunity for advertising. So he has actually launched YBhg. You can see, it is like a digital billboard over there. This is how they allow the game developers to show advertisements within their games. So using the 3D billboards over here. So this is a different form of IP commercialization even in the digital world. So the latest IP commercialization that I want to touch on will be the non-fungible token, a unit of data stored on the digital ledgers actually they are using cryptocurrency over here, is also a blockchain technology that certifies a digital asset to be unique. In fact, this is called a proof of work system. So this works very well blend into IKR, the core solution IIPCC is having. IKR provides the proof of existence, whereby, the general principle for trade secret is that you don't disclose. Once you disclose, you defeat the purpose, because the general principle have been actually, they kill the general principle. By you disclosing your trade secret, that means you are no longer eligible under the trade secret protection. So having this IKR, you basically need to actually fingerprint the confidential information, and then it will be stored. And previously, it has been launched since 2015 itself, and YBhg have been keeping records also for the IKR records. And it will not, ask you to disclose the DNA. So it's a good synergy for this. And of course, in terms of IP monetization, Matrade itself, MITI through Matrade, already having this initiative, I think everyone should look into this IP registration for international market. That's all for my presentation today. Thank you very much. And I'll pass to the next panelist.
And last but not least, our next speaker is Datuk Dr. Daud.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and hello everyone. I'm Dr. Muhammad Daud Bakar. I'm delighted to be given this opportunity to share the screen together with other two great panelists on Islamic intellectual property and business sustainability. Basically, I am a Shariah advisor for global Islamic finance, not only in Malaysia, but beyond Malaysian shore. I have been incorporating companies in other 2 or 3 other jurisdictions of the world. On top of that, I'm also active in the big data analytics and AI, creating a lot of basically apps in the intellectual property almost every week, every month to be rolled out to the market. So the topic has been very good to me and very dear to my heart. And I'm thankful to the organizers, both MIHAS and Matrade, for choosing this topic and for having me on this platform. So basically, perhaps you might be wondering, how do we define Islamic intellectual property, if you like, IIP? And this is something, a basic concept to grasp before we can move on to understand the potential of, like Patricia was mentioning about the commercialization of the IP. And the basic element would be the right understanding of Islamic intellectual property, covering all aspects that Prof. Ida mentioned about, or the trademark, copyright, patent, brand name, industrial design, and geographic indication and whatnot. I think in a nutshell, I have to give a very simple definition of IIP. It's very much, it does not differ that much from the conventional, if you like, intellectual property. It shares the same feature. In fact, for you or for us to recognize any Islamic intellectual property, it must pass all the criteria, technical criteria of the conventional IP for that matter. What makes Islamic IP different from the other segment of IP is that the content of the products, the services which underlie the trademark and brand name must be Shariah compliant. This is the only condition. But when it comes to the hardware of it, they should share the same common features. But when it comes to the content and the DNA of the product and services, must be Shariah compliant. For example, if you were to design IP product very much technical, and it is meant to serve the conventional banking exclusively, and that is not permissible under Shariah. Or perhaps to manage the delivery of non-halal food more effectively through the whatever technology, that is not compliant. But if the same technology, which is being converted into a proper trademark and brand name, but it is meant to serve the entire industry, Islamic or otherwise, then that should be Shariah compliant. I have seen many products in the market. More often than not, most of them are Shariah compliant. It's a good news because Shariah compliant or IP is industry agnostic. It has not taken any side with any industry of the world. So prima facie, essentially, it should be Shariah compliant, except few content and few services which are very much earmarked or designated for non-Shariah compliant activities, which are very limited at the end of the day. So this is the first aspect that we need to focus on without neglecting and putting aside the technical definition of IP, as both Prof. Ida and Patricia have highlighted just now. The other aspect of looking into Islamic IP is to dive deep a bit into the commercialization aspect of it. Though we might have a Shariah compliant IP in whatever form that we have heard from the two speakers just now, we need to focus a bit on monetizing or perhaps commercializing the IP moving forward. We need to follow the Shariah compliant financing structures and vehicle to make it possible. So if you wanted to also go for franchising and licensing, the term and conditions should be Shariah compliant, avoiding all the payment of interest, late payment penalty, and what have you. So this is something that the Islamic finance scholars and the lawyers will be able to help you to write down a waterproof Shariah compliant legal documentation before you go to the fundraising with the investors, Malaysia or overseas. So this is something that we need to be aware of. Though you might have a very good apps and all the necessary technical requirement of having a good IP, but when it comes to the financial way of doing things, it should be equally Shariah compliant. For me, I have been involved in monetizing a few, IP. I have one client in Germany. They have developed their own software to manage the banker assurance. They are good in selling insurance through banks. They call it banker assurance, one of the best in Europe. So they are coming to Islamic world in Middle East. I was involved in the monetizing their system, which they have developed on their own for the last how many years, using their own money and being accredited by the reputable companies for the IP as well as for the valuation from the financial perspective and being rated by a few rating agencies of the world. So everything was intact. The IP registration was there. The financial valuation was there, and also the rating, because for them to issue bond, they need to be rated at the end of the day by the reputable. So we have done the proper valuation and the proper check on the IP as well as on the ranking. And I mean, it was not big, it was 27 million euro, and they were able to raise sukuk or Islamic bond up to 35 million based on the appetite of the investor. Interestingly, whatever they have done in the past for the last 10 years, they can use that to commercialize a new funding for them, to get new money for them to open new market in Saudi and UAE. Without having, to create new asset, they can use and leverage on their particular IP to raise more or new funding for that matter. And I think I was glad that Patricia mentioned about the some jurisdiction allowing the IP to be collateralized. This is a good move because we need to see into Islamic intellectual property as dynamic asset. It cannot be be stagnant and very much dormant in nature. Otherwise, no point of working very hard day and night to create our own IP. So we need a very enabling legal framework to allow the business, the IP owner for that matter, to really push the boundaries for them to make use of the asset and to make sure that every single cent they spend to create this good name and good branding and good trademark worthwhile at the end of the day. And this is the whole idea of having discussion to help our business owners who have developed in the past how many years their own trademark and branding to be able to capitalize, if you like, the IP moving forward. And for the Islamic IP owners, I think good news. This is a very much new market, not yet being discussed openly, but perhaps this MIHAS and Madrid seminar and forum would open up the new thinking process that everything that you do and you have done your requirement, what is required to register your IP, I think don't stop at that. Think beyond that to really commercialize and make sure that in addition to being protected of your ideas, trade secret, you can also make them as the new asset moving forward. I've done a lot in my own IP, which we have created through the small apps. We work with a small group of lecturers, a group of NGOs, a group of state agencies to look into special issue that they are faced with. Let's say management of dropout student, management of English teacher, management of flood, management of what have you, and turn that into apps that can predict and prescribe what would happen and what can be done through the certain algorithm. And that is a real IP. Of course, we have not registered that. Suppose we wanted to license and franchise it, then we need to register it as IP, and we can roll out and we can bring the same product to other countries. Because what is good in Malaysia can be good in other part of the world in managing various variables of the economy of the world. I think with that, I hope the very definition of IP or Islamic IP is very clear. You have to comply with all the requirements under technical IP, and we have to make sure the content of the IP, let's say the software and the apps and the product you are selling, should be Shariah compliant. There are few prohibited items, not more than 10. The rest should be Shariah compliant. And the way you commercialize and you monetize the asset that you have should be equally Shariah compliant. By having these two conditions, we are good to go, and we are good to venture and embark on Islamic intellectual property to create your own business sustainability. Thank you very much for having me in this platform.
So there it goes. Our three speakers are highlighting their key experience and insights on their domain expertise. Now we are moving on to a panel discussion, and I would like to issue the first question to Datuk Daud. What is the golden opportunity with Islamic intellectual property, especially for Malaysia, one of the global leaders in the world, highlighting tangible and intangible benefits? Dr. Daud?
Yeah, thank you, Jenna, for that interesting and timely question, I have to say, because as highlighted and alluded by other speakers, Malaysia is known for halal industry as well as for the Islamic finance industry. We have, developed and we have gone a bit far compared to the other Muslim countries with regard to Islamic finance and halal industry. So what is lacking basically is to transform and to convert and to move one level up to really create some of the processes, some of the products, some of the algorithm behind this two industry, halal and Islamic finance, to become the of IP in terms of design, in terms of packaging, in terms of even geography, like the name of Malaysia can be made, or MIHAS for that matter, can be transformed into a premium asset that can be commercialized, and we can create more value, to be honest, compared to the asset we are selling or services. The value that can be generated from having this IP would be pervasive moving forward. The second thing I wanted to mention that we have the talent in Malaysia. Somehow, without realizing, we have the good talent, professors, students, researchers, even the government officers. They are in sync to develop this industry. So, but what is lacking is to make them familiar with the potential of IP moving forward, because we can create value from selling, we can create value from IP, and this is something that everyone needs help, and we need to make everyone aware the potential of creating another leg of value through IP in one way or another.
Thanks, Datuk Daud. And I think I have a next question looking for Professor Ida to chip in on her experience. What are the building blocks that we need to build a sustainable and robust ecosystem to enable growth and opportunities in IP Islamic world in Malaysia? Professor Ida?
Thank you very much, Jenna. As my presentation highlights, the Malaysian IP system in Malaysia is very established already. We've had years of experience in not only the legal system, but also in terms of the IP application processing. And if you look at the number of national policies that were rolled out in relation to IP, we have got quite a few as well. We have a policy on commercialization, we have a policy on valuation, right? Datuk Daud was talking about collateralization. We've set up a policy on valuation of intellectual property. We have also tried to set up an IP trading market. So in terms of the initiatives that has been rolled out by the regulators and by the government and all the interested institutions or relevant institutions in Malaysia, Madrid particularly for the purpose of export, SME Bank for the purpose of training of the SMEs. So with that already in place, but what is missing is a full-blown participation by the SMEs. And we know that the SMEs are the biggest enterprises in Malaysia, but the percentage of involvement in intellectual property is very minimal. If you compare with the number of products out there in the market, if you go to a typical shopping mall, on the shelf, talk about just say curry powders, right? There are plenty of brands, but you'd be surprised that not many of them are actually registered. So the biggest obstacle I would see is the reluctance on the part of the businesses themselves. So I would have thought that one of the important building blocks for a successful IP ecosystem is the buy-in and full-blown participation by the businesses themselves, right? Businesses must have a proper understanding of what IP is, how IP can come in and help them out for their business, because with IP they'll be able to distinguish their products from others, they're able to penetrate outside market, they'll be able to license out, branch out, do joint venture agreement and whatnot. So businesses must have a proper understanding of what IP is. They must be willing to invest in training themselves as well as their people on what IP is and how IP does support their business. And the training program is already out there. There are many, many institutions that provide those training programs. It's just a matter of reaching out and get themselves into those training programs. So the other thing is they also have to understand that whatever product they roll out in the market is not only for today or tomorrow, and it's not only for your own valley. I call valley because in PKP we are now still confined in our own daerah, right? You're talking about manufacturing or distributing outside your daerah to other states, and of course with Madrid to the global market, because the halal market is actually a huge, huge market. So it's good for you to invest yourself, not only in terms of money, because some of these programs actually are given out free, but also in terms of time to understand what IP is and how IP can support your business, and how IP can be quite critical or relevant for your product. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Ida. I think that's excellent insight. I think we want to also hear from Patricia. Patricia, since you're in the industry side and also representing clients in industry, what are the key actions that businesses and organizations can take to build their IP? Patricia?
Thanks, Jenna, for the question. I think we shouldn't have wait further. As you know, for this era, everyone actually moving into the digital economy, talking about knowledge sharing. That's why you are here today. And everyone focusing on digitization and move on to digitalization. But what they actually miss out is that asset. We are talking about asset over here. Previously, we focused a lot on some constructed real property as our asset or company or property. But for today's context, this has no longer sufficient. Okay, you need to actually go further than that. Give, for example, if today you walk into a shopping mall, once there's actually construction going on, they actually cover up in the red, color kind of wooden thing over there, and they put up their cafe. So your immediate mindset is that, oh, San Francisco coming in. So what are we talking about? Are we just focusing on the traditional IP over here, the trademark per se? No, the answer is not. We are actually zoomed into the trade dress itself, because San Francisco or even McDonald's, Starbucks, they are not only having trademark per se as their IP assets. They also file patent, their design, and also copyright. And of course, the big chunk of it, like I mentioned earlier on, that you cannot find any category that you can actually chuck in, that will be under the trade secret. So where is your trade secret? Not forgetting everyone tapping into cloud computing today. So all your processed data is everywhere in the digital space. So are you not afraid that your trade secret not being well protected? At least, I would say the very least, you should map up and strategize for the common IP, the traditional IP to be registered first. Be it trademark, copyright, geographical indication, or patent design, then you look for the trade secret thereafter. Without which, how are you, going to negotiate with people into any transaction deal? You are never on the upper hand because you don't have an asset to talk about first. And why are we looking into Islamic IP today? Because Malaysia has already moved into Islamic financing, Islamic fintech, all those things. But they also talk about digital currency, right? Digital asset. So the first thing you have to do, you need to categorize your asset first before you can digitalize them, before you can even do any other things. Otherwise, you will be left behind. And in terms of valuation of your company, you are at the losing end. You can only look for some, costing in terms of the expenses you have actually spent for your R&D, but you never convert those things into IP assets. And that will assist you to increase the value in your company and corporation itself. So I think the key action for a business or organization to build their IP, you cannot run away to quickly look into the traditional IP, secure it, okay? And in terms of funding, don't have the wrong mindset thinking that I have to grow big before I go for IP registration. No. Because for today's context, actually, in fact, the principle we have been adopting for IP in the IP law world is about principle first to file, no longer first to use. So you are at the losing end if you don't get it filed first and handling process of trade secret. So that's all from my side for this question, Jenna. Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia. And I think thank you for all the panelists. We will zoom into some of the Q&A that we've got. I think the first one that is that we have is, what is the definition of Islamic IP and difference between what's the difference between a normal or general IP and Islamic IP? Maybe Datuk Daud, you can take this.
Okay, thank you, Jenna. I think I have alluded to that definition and the distinction between the two just now. Basically, to recap what I have said, I mean, the very basic ingredient of Islamic intellectual property is to have the underlying asset or content or services must be Shariah compliant, and avoiding the financial activities which are based on usury or interest, non-halal food and drink, the pornography and the entertainment, excessive entertainment, the weaponry, the non-halal drink for that matter, the drugs element, the scientific research which are not, noble enough, like cloning of human and what have you. So these are the few things which are to be avoided at the end of the day. That's why I was saying, if you are not in one of these prohibited item, I think prima facie you are deemed to be developing a product selling as a curry and or the food or the services, financial or otherwise, which are Shariah compliant. So this is something that you can be with quite easily. That's why, without going that further, I would assume that most of the registered trademark or branding in Malaysia, they are Shariah compliant already. The only problem, we are not aware they are Shariah compliant or IP, Islamic IP. That's why we are not, making our prospectus, our info memo toward Islamic investor. If we know we have a good apps already, which is Shariah compliant, which is in sync with the Islamic intellectual property, we can widen our, access to the funding activities. This is the whole idea, because I'm sure that most, if not all, the registered trademark or whatever brand in Malaysia, they are Shariah compliant, that can be used to talk to, Islamic investor like YBhg, EPF. They have a separate scheme of EPF and PNB. They have a big chunk of Islamic fund over there. So this is not to mention overseas. I'm helping now one, Malaysian company who has, developed a good, animation program, revenue-wise 100 million over ringgit Malaysia. Now he's wanted to bring another program for overseas market. It's the same, design, color, and script, but international version. And he's looking for a fund up to 50 million ringgit Malaysia. And this is a good, thing that we can talk to Matrix, we can talk to anyone else. But this is a good IP ready to. It's about animation at the end of the day. I mean, there's no Islamic or otherwise. I mean, unless you put the abusive sexual scene and whatnot, which is not right for the children at the end of the day. So this is something that we need to take note of. The content should be Shariah compliant. If you are in doubt, ask the scholars about that. And the way you raise the funding must be Shariah compliant. It cannot be issuing bond and the normal commercial product to get because you want it to be compliant from cover to cover. The content is compliant, and also the vehicle of financing should be compliant at the end of the day. Thank you, Jenna.
Thanks, Datuk Daud. I think we have another question. I think this is for Patricia. What is the legal recourse or avenue if there is a dispute in Islamic IP?
Okay, maybe I would like to, give a brief clarification over here first, because a lot of people tend to confuse, if you are dealing with Islamic IP, do you need to actually go to Sharia court? So that is the immediate mindset they have. But when we talk about Islamic IP, this is somehow, quite niche. And how can we get the expert to actually, deal with this kind of cases or disputes, So actually, we can actually make a simple, direction for those who actually encounter this kind of disputes. In the ADR world, we call alternative dispute resolution, which actually comprise of mediation and also arbitration, other than court, okay? A simple understanding is that if you want to opt out from the open court proceedings, you can actually go for a closed door proceeding. So the closed door proceeding will actually, give you two options. Either you want to go for mediation or arbitration over here. So mediation part is that you don't need a judge, basically. Okay, there's no judge, no one to judge your case over there. So the person is just a facilitator to facilitate and see whether you can come up with an amicable settlement. So a lot of time when we encounter any disputes, contractual basis, or even IP disputes, or even we want to zoom in into Islamic IP, chances is we want to achieve an amicable settlement. What for we want to go for legal proceedings if, let's say, you have a chance to get it settled? Because this is about business deal, especially if those IP involving listed company, they need to make announcement if they proceed for open court legal proceedings over here. So mediation is always the first choice. You don't need any expert, but at least you get a facilitator. We call it accredited mediator. In Malaysia itself, we do have AIAC, ASEAN International Arbitration Center. They can actually assist you, or even Malaysian Bar, they have a mediation center called MMC. So they can always deal with this kind of facilitation, we call it mediation. So a mediator will help to facilitate for amicable settlement to be, to be signed by an agreement. Thereafter, you can enforce your right if any one of you in breach. But the other alternative will be arbitration. So arbitration, both parties actually can select their own arbitrator. So you can check through their CV and know that they actually have experiences into Shariah compliance, like probably like our distinguished speaker over here, Datuk Daud. And also, you can actually appoint more than one arbitrator to sit for, to hear your case for the disputes, and also get maybe Professor Dr. Ida in case, just for example. So you can actually have a mixture of both of them, or one particular arbitrators having both experiences. Of course, not confining within Malaysia. We are talking about worldwide. You can actually, like purchasing insurance, plug and play over here. So arbitration, one thing good is that you can select the governing law, okay, and also you can select the arbitrator that having the experiences that you wish to. So you cannot thereafter say, oh, I'm not comfortable with this arbitrator whatsoever, because both parties have already mutually agreed, unlike the court proceedings. So in terms of the legal recourse, other than court proceedings, mediation, arbitration. So you look for the arbitration center. Actually, worldwide, we have a lot. For IP Hub per se, Singapore, SIAC, and Hong Kong, we have HKIAC, and Malaysia, we have AIAC. So you can look around for those experienced people. They can fly from other countries to those IP Hub to settle your case. Thank you, Jenna.
Thanks, Patricia. Thanks for the coverage of the legal available recourse for everyone who wants to tap into the IP side, and if there's a dispute, where to get help. I think we're going to address one more question. I think this is for Professor Ida. How IP as a whole plays a part in business and its sustainability?
Thank you, Jenna. There is a common presumption that intellectual property revolves only as protection and should only be resorted to when the business is already stable. But in fact, IP could be both a shield and a sword. And IP plays a very important tool for marketing in the sense that it creates a strong and sustainable brand. And the fact that it can be enforced at any times and any situation, as long as there's an infringement, and if there is a risk of a copycat that threatens the company's sale, causing damage to revenue or causing damage to reputation, or your company is at risk, then you have that choice of going against the copycat. And the fact that we have a bundle of rights, all right? IPR tool is not a single tool. There are a number of them, and it can be used together at the same time, protecting different aspects of the product and different aspects of the business. And all these IP tools varies in terms of duration of protection. So it's important for you to understand where copyright comes in, where trademark comes in, where trade secrets comes in, because, if one singly can protect your business, what more if you have a multiple of them? It would be very, very useful in protecting your company's product or identity. The most important thing is that, like what Prof. Daud said, IP is an asset, right? And if you own a business, your asset is not just the physical assets that you have in your business. At times, your IP, your trademark, the value of trademark can even be 10,000 times bigger than your physical asset. And it's very, very useful, because if you're having business difficulties, for example, then you can rely on your IP to get loan, to do joint venture agreement, to merge with another company, and perhaps to inquire at other business to diversify your product. So if you look at statistics, for example, intangible assets portray very prominently in many, many big businesses. For example, in 2015, the Apple brand was estimated to be valued at 170 billion USDs. Google itself 120 billion, Coca-Cola 78 billion USD. And if you Google what are the top valuable brand in Malaysia, then names like Petronas, TMB, DG will come into play. So those assets can be on its own because it's a property right. It's a separate right. It's a separate property than its intangible assets. Unknown brands, of course, have no value at all. Then if you have any business difficulties, then you don't have anything to fall back on because you don't have any assets that is worth for you to show to even to the bank, for example, if you are wanting to get loan, or if you approach your business partners, for a joint venture agreement. Indeed, the valuation process for an IP may differ, but around the world, they have come up with some standard methodology to come up with IP valuation. And like I mentioned, Malaysia has come up with the national policy on IP evaluation, and they've already trained IP valuers as well. And this is very, very important so that people have a standard way of valuing intellectual property. And many, many companies, big companies especially, at the end of the year, they do an IP audit and they then put a value sum to their IP as opposed to their physical assets. And you find that a big chunk of their asset is actually IP. So it's just start with, the small step, the humble step of registering your IP, just to create additional value to the company. Previously I mentioned how trademark gives additional value to the product, but that trademark itself will also give additional value to your business. The third one is, of course, commercialization opportunities. You can leverage your IP to get loans. You will be able to extract higher value for mergers and acquisitions. And with value comes opportunities in the industry with a huge pool of investors. Standing out is necessary. The bigger or stronger the brand, the more the number of investors willing to provide financial backings to the company. IP now, if you look at the new Trademarks Act 2019, for example, we explicitly mentioned that IP is a property on its own, and it can be used as a collateral to leverage loans from the bank. Of course, the valuation process would differ, from one banking institution to another. And like I mentioned as well, in the case of merger and acquisition, IP increases the value either in terms of the brand name or the technology aimed to be acquired. For example, Beats, a famous headphone that has invested many to market their brand, captured almost 70% of headphone market. The brand is recognizable everywhere. You can even find one in local market. Apple did their research and bought them for 3 billion USD, right? And then within the next few years, they managed to get back the 3 billion and generate more, at least until eventually Apple came out with their own lineup of handphones, which actually utilized hardware from the Beats hardware division. So whether you like it or not, if you are thinking about global market, IP is very, very important for your business and its sustainability. And since we are in pandemic and since we are still not recovering from pandemic, we're still in pandemic, there are a couple of points that we need to consider in sustaining IP as the world moves into online. And on top of that, the world is changing in other ways as well. If you remember a couple of years ago, they say the future is going green and going native. Consumers nowadays are very, very conscious. They want organic, they want lactose-free, and choosing a particular diet has become a trend in consumerism. And halal products can ride on this. And where do IP comes in? Always in halal industry, they talk about halal toyiban. Halal requires certification. Toyiban requires SIRIM, ISO standards, right? MESTI, good manufacturing practice. I would like to add the third component, which is intellectual property, because intellectual property gives the trust and confidence or uniqueness or distinctiveness of the product to reach global market. And if you look at the world now, as a result of losses in COVID-19, you need to create your own enterprise. And of course, you have to think of creating your own product. And when you roll out this baby into the market, you should be thinking big. You're not just looking at rolling out to your valley, daerah, again, in this COVID-19 pandemic, right? But also eventually to the whole of Malaysia and eventually to reach out to other Muslims in the global market. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ida. So that wraps up our panel discussion and Q&A. Thank you so much, Professor Ida, Patricia Chung, and Datuk Dr. Daud. I think it's been a fantastic insight and sharing discussion. That wraps up our session. Thank you all. Thanks, MIHAS and Madieha. Thank you.
Thank you for attending the session. We hope you have found it insightful. We are taking a short break now, but please come back for our next session on Nigeria launching pad to penetrate West African halal markets at 2 p.m. If you have further questions for the speakers, do visit them at their virtual booths for further information and discussion. In the meantime, we'd like to remind you that the MIHAS virtual platform is open day and night for you to visit at any time convenient to you. We hope you will take the time to browse and visit the many attractive exhibitors, virtual booths, and programs.